my sister, third oldest sister, overdosed on heroin and cut her wrists. And the next day, my dad brought her into the living room and held her up with the wrist exposed with the stitches and said, "See, this is what drugs do to you."
Wow. And how old were you at that point?
I was about 4 or 5 years old.
Right.
And I remember standing there going, yeah, that's what I want. He taught me to be the best alcoholic he could. Yeah.
Right.
And I proved to be a very good one. I was suicidal 90% of my life. Like, it's only 20 years I've gone without thinking about killing myself, and got a little heated discussion with my dad about it. And he knocked me to the ground with a fist in that discussion. And I'm sitting on the ground going, okay, screw you, buddy. Like, this is it. I'm not even going to try and be good anymore. I always tried to please him. The next brother above me that actually got me on needles, but I wanted to, so if I had a little promise or a hope inside me, it was a hope to do every drug on the planet and die doing one of them. Okay, and he'd take a belt and beat you. Like, he used to like to hold your hand and let you run around as he beat you. So you couldn't go anywhere, and he would just turn in a circle and slap you with the belt. That brother sexually abused me, I think, when I was about 10 years old. I went through years and years of therapy for this, and I've blocked so much from my mind. Fortunately, I've never recalled that. I've felt the pain and whatnot in the therapy sessions.
All right, welcome everybody. This is Trees Philosophies, and today I'm joined by my fellow brother Rick from the church. And once I heard Rick's story, just his life, everything that he's been through, I knew that it's something that really wowed me, and I know that it's something that a lot of people can also appreciate and take some sort of value from, and just to learn how God played a role in his life to help him, save him from all the traumas that he's experienced from a young age. So without further ado, Rick, thank you so much for joining me.
Oh, I'm glad to be here, and glad to have met you. It's an honor to be sitting here with you, brother.
Thank you so much. Let's start from the beginning, but then we were kind of talking a little bit, and you were telling me about your father. So maybe that is the appropriate place to start from. What do you think?
The real beginning?
The true beginning.
Yeah. Well, my father was a military cop who fought in World War II and Korea. He was wounded in Korea. He actually emigrated here from Denmark when he was 4 years old. And so all my life, I knew him as an angry alcoholic, basically. Oh, I guess I'm learning more that he wasn't always angry. There were moments where he could be a nice person, but the majority, every day he drank. So once the drink was introduced, then he could just switch to the anger in a flick of a second, and basically that environment in our home kept everybody in the home on eggshells. So you never knew how he was going to react to anything that you did, said, or thought to do sometimes,
So at any moment in time, due to the alcohol, he
could explode with anger, rage, violence sometimes.
But when he wasn't on the alcohol, he was okay?
He taught me some of my carpentry skills. So we were a relatively poor family. Not totally poor, but we had to do things for ourselves. So I learned a lot of skill from the man, yet couldn't appreciate it until my later life, until after he passed. unfortunately. So
It's tough. You have we have these things that we learn almost through osmosis, through diffusion, through active practice, but then at the end of the day, sometimes it's hard to fully appreciate and grasp them until a certain amount of time has passed, and then you look back and then say, "Oh wow, that there was value in that. There was a lesson there."
yo, definitely. Like I remember very young wanting a watch. So I went to my dad, told him I wanted a watch, and he's like, "Well, go get a job," you know. And I could
Right.
barely push a lawnmower, but I earned enough for a watch, you know.
Okay.
So I laughed so much. My first business of my own was cutting grass for people.
Okay. Wow.
So that was,
So it went full circle.
yeah, it was a very strange moment in my life when I realized, look, you're doing exactly what you did the first time you
Right.
wanted something. So
That's crazy.
I,
That's crazy.
I had my good memories of my father after my healing, because the best thing my dad taught me was to be an alcoholic.
That the
Uh,
best thing.
that that was what he passed on the best. All
Right.
right, it
Oh,
wasn't the
okay, I see
best
what you
thing.
mean.
Like
Right, right. That's what he
he
taught the
taught me to
best.
be the best alcoholic he
Right,
could. Yeah,
right, right.
and I proved to be a very good one. Bad
So,
one, terrible.
the do you believe like the example that you saw from your father, it almost
Uh,
was what kind of got you also going in that direction?
I realized raising my own son. One day I was watching my son, and I had just made a face, and then a little while later, he did that face exactly.
Mm.
And I'm like, oh my goodness, I have to be so careful what I show my son,
Right.
because he just emulates me.
And
And
what age was he when you saw this?
he was like 4 or 5 years old.
I see. I
Yeah.
see.
And man, like I can remember my real struggle in my own life started around the same time. Okay. So I'm the youngest of 10 kids. Uh,
That's 10 kids, folks. 10 kids.
we were all pretty wild. I was raised more by my older sisters than my mother, but I remember,
Is it just because there were so many of you that the sisters had
yeah,
to help?
yeah, it's like my oldest sisters were in their teens when I was a kid, so
Right.
young teens. So it was a natural place. Also, a lifestyle where you were told to get out of the house. Yeah. So, but one of my sisters, so all my brothers and sisters at that time were into, this was the 60s. All right. I was born in 63.
Okay.
So they were doing drugs. All
Mm-hmm.
right. And my sister, third oldest sister, overdosed on heroin and cut her wrists. And the next day, my dad brought her into the living room and held her up with the wrist exposed with the stitches and said, "See, this is what drugs do to you."
Wow. And how
And
old were you at that point?
I was about 4 or 5 years old,
Right.
and I remember standing there going, "Yeah, that's what I want." I
Interesting.
remember that statement. I don't remember a whole lot about those years
Right.
because it wasn't pleasant. But that statement, I remembered even when I became an intravenous drug user. I could never figure out, because I was suicidal 90% of my life. Like it's only 20 years I've gone without thinking about killing myself.
Wow.
So I don't really know what I was saying. Yes, that's what I want to in that statement, but
Interesting.
I I gravitated to both of them.
It just was almost natural. So, how old were you when you first started to drink?
Drink. So my dad was giving me beer shanties in the basements. He would drink with other veterans, and in their basements, and I would be getting beer shanties when I was 8, 9 years old.
So
So
8, 9.
that's beer and 7 Up or beer and ginger ale.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Uh, and yeah, that was okay to drink that. Stole my first few bottles of beer from grade 8,
Okay.
whatever
About
that is,
13,
12,
13, 12,
13,
13.
12. Yeah, 12. Yeah, and then later, uh, my middle brother took me out to a social at an arena, and this was after something happened between my dad and I, but I was on the road to going crazy. Well, I was crazy. I was on the road to destroying myself because that
Already.
at 12 years old. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So
Was it because of the alcohol that you had already started drinking, or was it just something else? Just like the
because
family
of the
life?
abuse, I took physical abuse from my father, sexual abuse from a brother, um, emotional abuse from brothers, sisters, parents. Not my mother. My mother was kind of like out there. She
Mhm.
was lost in her own world. I don't know. I didn't have a relationship with her.
Mm.
So there was probably abandonment issues. Uh,
So
and
all those things were just adding up, and by 12 years old, you were already on that path of self-destruction, self-harm.
so what really triggered me was I was a pretty good kid up until then. I got teased a lot at school because we didn't have great clothes and whatnot, and I got in fights. But to me, I was a pretty good kid. I was bringing home good marks. And then my second oldest brothers had just been out to visit them in Winnipeg, and they sent me a Fleetwood Mac album for
Okay.
Christmas.
Okay.
And at the time, I had about $3,000 in the bank because
Okay.
I'd worked all my childhood, like
Okay.
from 10 years old, I think. I was pretty work on the farm, save money.
It's pretty good for a little kid.
Yeah, yeah. So I also got 1,500 from a motorcycle accident. So I was pretty rich at the time.
Okay.
And I wanted to buy a stereo and put it in the basement of the house so I could listen to the album, right?
Right.
And my mom was like adamant, no. And I went and got a little heated discussion with my dad about it. And he knocked me to the ground with a fist in
Oh,
that
wow.
discussion. And I'm sitting on the ground going, okay, screw you, buddy. Like, this
Right.
is it. I'm not even going to try and be good anymore. I always tried to please him, you know. But when he did that to me, I could take the beatings with the belts, uh, the angry slaps and whatnot. But when he hit me with his fist, that was too much.
Mm.
You know, he wasn't my father anymore.
And for something that you felt was undeserved, I suppose you just wanted a
Uh,
stereo.
I think he didn't like the fact that I was pushing so hard for it. I was the last of 10 kids. I'm sure they had been through everything by
Right.
that point. I look at it now and go, yeah, I was I was not being a good kid at the time, you know.
Okay.
Uh,
Your patience had run thin from dealing with so many of your siblings, I suppose.
Possibly, seeing all the bad. So, okay, so my oldest brother was a drug addict. My second oldest sister was had this was 8 years after she had tried to kill herself on drugs, you know. So like there's family origin, family history of drugs. Not that they played a role until it was the next brother above me that actually got me on needles,
Oh, wow.
but I wanted to, you know. So if he didn't, I would have got it somewhere else.
I see.
But
So where had you gotten that idea from?
the desire to kill myself,
Yes.
because that was what I learned in later life was the cause of my drinking the cause of my drugging.
Mm.
I had a little promise or a hope inside me. It was a hope to do every drug on the planet and die doing one of them.
Okay.
So
Wow.
yeah, so they were mixed together, the suicidal tendencies and the alcohol drug abuse.
And just to take a step back a little bit, talking about your father, do you think that he started drinking alcohol to cope with his war memories and what he dealt with there, or was it something that was just genetically passed down to him as well?
Well, I know his dad was an alcoholic, so there's probably I know there's generational curse, and I've always looked at the alcoholism in my whole family
Mm.
as a generational curse. So I don't know, like my dad had a brother, but life ended badly between them. They don't. I never met that man.
I see. I see.
Um, that was after the Second World War. So, but every one of my siblings, brothers and sisters, except for one who got addicted to pharmaceuticals, has either been a drug addict or an alcoholic. Every one of my nieces and nephews, I quit counting at 30,
Wow.
has a drug or alcohol problem.
Wow.
Unfortunately, their kids are starting with that too. Um, I have a son. I waited so long. I waited till I was 42 before I felt it was safe to have a child because I had finally done enough therapy. He does not do drugs. He does not drink. And I see him as the end of the generational curse because while he was raised, we were in church all the time. We prayed over him. We prayed for him all the time, and he was a shining light in his younger days towards God. So
Mm.
it's like it brings great joy to my heart to see him not relying on this garbage. And part of that is because I had gotten healthy enough to share with him the stuff that went on with me and not try to create some false background for him, you know. It's like,
Right.
yeah, I had a terrible childhood, man, and anytime my past came up in the way I treated him, I would get down on my knees and look him straight in the eyes and go, Nathaniel, I'm sorry. That was some of my past coming into my present. And it's not about you, it's about the things I battle. So,
So I would
unfortunately,
almost say that the generational curse came to an end with you, and then you passed that down to him almost.
possibly, yeah.
I don't know, just one way of
Yeah,
looking at it.
he's never touched alcohol. I've had so
Mm.
much in me that,
Hmm.
yeah.
So you talked about a little bit about the abuse you suffered as a child. Can you go a
So
little bit more in detail about that?
I think the worst was the emotional abuse because my dad would yell and scream at you and names and whatnot before he would beat you. Like, and he'd take a belt and beat you. Like, he used to like to hold your hand and let you run around as he beat you. So you couldn't go anywhere, and he would just turn in a circle and
Hmm.
slap you with the belt. Uh, that was that was bad, but I, a lot of my abuse came from my brothers too. In that sometimes they would get abused by my father, and then I would get abused too from them because I was down. I would say something wrong to them, and they'd blow up at me,
Right.
and that hurt more than anything. I think
So,
because I became an isolated person in a family of 10.
hmm,
Yeah,
that's powerful.
yeah, that was the hardest part of my childhood was being alone.
And you're surrounded by so many siblings. You'd think that you would have people to share with, people to care for you and stuff. But
Yeah,
it sounds like the abuse that they were suffering, they were from your
everybody
father.
was
They were
caring
passing
for
that down.
themselves. Yeah, they
They're,
didn't know how to care. We were never taught to care for anybody else.
hmm,
We
wow,
were taught to survive.
wow.
So
So this led to you wanting to have those suicidal thoughts, and then led to the drinking. So by 12, you're starting to steal beer from your father. And how did the alcohol develop? The issue with alcohol,
so after he dropped me with his fist,
right?
I went out that night and I bought a 40 ouncer.
Okay.
Yeah, we lived in the country. You could
Hmm.
do it, no problem.
Yeah.
12 years old, I was 6 feet tall.
Okay.
Yeah,
Nice.
it's like,
Those Danish genes.
yeah, yeah. And I had a brother 4 years older than me. We looked like twins.
Okay.
So I had legal ID by the time I was 14, I think.
Okay. Nice.
It was not a good thing, but
Or not nice.
yeah.
Not nice.
Yeah,
Not nice.
yeah, it was crazy. Yeah. So
So that night was the kind of
uh,
beginning of the real heavy consumption of alcohol.
basically, as soon as he did that, I went wild, like smoking marijuana, hash. Started smoking that right away because I smoked my first joint in grade 8, so I knew people to get it from. Uh, Alcohol, well, he was giving me beer shanties, so it really started there. And then, yeah, just the brother that abused me sexually took me out to a big dance at the arena, and I went to the bar and ordered a double rum and coke, I think.
Mhm.
And the bartender looked at him and goes, "Is he old enough?" And he shook his head, and I was okay to buy drinks all night. So I was doing doubles and triples of rum and coke all night that night. Got so drunk, I staggered to the Legion to get a ride home. Puked my guts out outside, fell down the stairs into the bar, and just crawled up to a table. And
And how old were you at this point?
I was 12 at that point.
You were 12. Wow.
Yeah, and then
Drinking double rum and cokes
yeah,
all night.
yeah,
Wow.
yeah. It was my drinking was insane. I would black out just about every time I drank. Like right from that age, I didn't black out that night. Well, maybe a little bit because I don't remember walking over to Legion.
Hmm.
I remember my mom freaking out on me when I'm laying on my head on the table, and then get home that night. My old man kicks me out of bed at 5 in the morning to shovel the snow out of the driveway, and then doesn't say another thing to me for 2 weeks. And the next thing he says to me, I'm walking in the Legion, and he goes, he's sitting having a drink, and he's like, "You want a drink?" And I looked at him and I go, "Nope, got a bottle."
Like
So
he was offering you?
he was offering me to sit down and drink with him.
Oh
Yeah,
wow.
but I was still so mad at him. I told him piss off. Basically, I could
Okay.
buy my own booze.
Wow.
Had a ton of money in the bank at the time. I lived quite high for the next couple of years.
Do you
Yeah.
think he was trying to like make amends with you at that point, or?
Or, you know, showing some sort of connection in that maybe you're a man now. I don't know.
Interesting.
Yeah.
But in your
It,
own pride and ego, you weren't willing to
uh,
accept that.
no, because he ruined it by not talking to me for 2 weeks.
Right.
Like that's the problem with alcoholics is we don't know how to communicate.
Hmm.
It's a sad sickness that goes with the drinking. Just I was raised in a home where we were taught not to talk to people.
Hmm.
because there's too many dirty secrets that can't be told.
I see.
All right. Like my dad abused my sisters. Uh, they were, everybody in my family was a mess. You know, my older brothers were a mess because they rebelled, right? They're the first ones to rebel. So one moved back to Winnipeg, one went in the Navy. Uh, the oldest one went to jail for 10 years, you know. Yeah, I was in Kingston at 10 years old, Kingston Penitentiary, when it was maximum security penitentiary.
Mm-hmm.
That scared me.
Visiting your brother?
Yeah, yeah.
Wow. And what did he do to go to jail
Well,
like that?
they busted him for armed robbery. They wanted him for
Okay.
a bunch of other things, but they couldn't prove any of
I
it. So
see.
they gave him 10 years for the armed robbery.
I see.
Yeah.
See.
Yeah, he was. None of us were good
So
kids.
didn't have the best role models in that time.
No. So to me, my best role model left when I was about 4 or 5. He came to Ottawa with us when we moved here, and I saw him running away from home. And yeah, I think that's where my first abandonment came from, was him leaving, because he was still, unfortunately, he's still addicted to drugs and, smokes pot every day and drinks every day. But in my childhood, he was the only one that didn't hurt me.
I see.
You know, so
he was a good
he
friend.
was a special brother to me, because my only memories of him are good.
I see.
Yeah,
But him leaving, that contributed to the feeling of abandonment.
definitely, like seeing him crawl out that window. Yeah.
You actually witnessed it yourself?
Yeah, saw him go. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, I think my heart broke then,
Wow.
because like he was leaving me with dad, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And my other brothers weren't quite as nice as he was. Yeah.
Right.
So
you were telling me about your older brother and like the abuse that he had towards you, and how that contributed to everything.
So that brother sexually abused me, I think, when I was about 10 years old. I went through years and years of therapy for this, and I've blocked so much from my mind. Fortunately, I've never recalled that. I've felt the pain and whatnot in the therapy sessions,
Right.
but never the actual picture of the incident. So I know it's real. 3 years of therapy, like yeah, that that brother, he was also very violent towards me. Like he pulled a knife, smashed my head on a brick wall 3 times, put a knife to my throat, threatened to kill me because I had 2 friends over and was having a good time. Continued to pull knives on me in bars and whatnot. Right up until the day I actually beat him quite badly, because it was just a situation. He came in, I thought it was somebody else coming into our home that I had just had a fight with, because he was getting rowdy in my parents' home.
Okay.
And it was my brother that came in the door. I was ready to fight this other guy.
Okay.
And
that brother
said something. Well, I was finally totally ready to fight that brother, as opposed to him having odds against me.
Right.
So he was 6 years older than me, I think.
Right.
And
so he's physically overpowering.
Yeah, and I always pulled the knife too. So.
Right.
But
that day you had the courage to stand up for yourself.
That day he got just a piece of my rage. I left that home. My dad kicked me out at 15 years old, and I didn't know how much rage I had in me. I was involved at the men's project in the Y in downtown Ottawa, and I was doing personal therapy with another therapist for PTSD. And I had both sessions in one day. And the personal therapy, we dug into some of the deep past. And then I was walking down the street to kill some time, and I saw a reflection of myself in a window. And I looked at myself and I went, no wonder people cross the street to get away from you. Like, I was so angry about all the stuff that happened to me that I wore a face and body language that told people to stay away. Yeah.
You had that anger on your face.
Yeah, it was with me until I drank. I drank to be happy.
I see.
Like, because otherwise I was angry and suicidal. It was a terrible mix.
So the drinking was the escape.
It was a sedative. Yeah.
So you wouldn't feel those emotions of anger and
It's the only time I could love somebody was if I was drunk.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. Got me into some bad relationships with women, I tell you.
So so you started drinking really heavily at 12 after that incident.
Yeah,
and then
I think
it just
12
continued.
years old, so I became a weekend drinker.
Okay.
Went into high school every weekend. Lived out in the country, so fill the trunk with beer of a buddy's car, whatever. I know my 16th birthday, we had old train tracks, so you could drive a car down the train tracks. So me and a buddy and two girls went to party a little bit on the train tracks, right? There's going to be other things happen, but
it's the thing you do in the country.
Yeah. Well, we're farm boys, right? Yeah. So I had 10 grams of hash in my pocket and a 26 of vodka and a jug of juice. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, well, who wants vodka and orange?
Yes.
And both the girls and the guy go, no. So I look at the orange juice and I go, well, toss that out the window.
Okay.
Right? So I drank that 26 by myself.
Oh, wow.
So I was blacked out before we got to Metcalf. This was in Russell. Okay. Blacked out. They said I got out on the main corner of Metcalf, had a piss on the main corner. Get to Russell. They let me out the main corner. I do the same thing. And then I just pass out leaning against the restaurant. And I don't know how I got home or anything. That was my 16th birthday. Okay. Yeah. Remember the next morning freaking because I still had a big chunk of hash in my pocket.
Okay.
And my mom had come in the room and grabbed my pants and done the wash.
Oh, no.
And I just ran out of it. I'm like, Mom, what'd you do with my pants? Oh, I washed them. I'm like, oh, shit. So I just go back to bed, right? Try and sleep it off. Get up 2 hours later and I'm like, oh, Mom, what'd you do with the stuff in my pants? Oh, I threw it on your dresser.
Okay.
And I go, and there's a chunk of hash like that, right? Like,
wow.
I'm like, wow. Yeah.
A little birthday gift, I suppose.
Well, it was a blessing and a cursing, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. She didn't know what was going on in my life.
Right.
Couldn't help me because it was going on in all the kids' lives, like.
And you said she was a bit disattached. She had her own kind of issues she was dealing with, so you never had like a proper relationship with her.
Drunk father and 10 kids, try to deal with that.
Right.
10 wild kids.
Right.
I couldn't imagine what she had to go through, what she had to block out. Right. Yeah. I don't blame her at all. I feel sorry. I had a bit of a relationship with her in the last part of her life, so I'm glad for that.
And during this whole time, you were not a believer in God at all. You were not following any Christian principles?
My at one point I had the number 666VI. That was my bank code, right?
Oh, okay. Wow.
Yeah, I almost got bad stuff tattooed to me, but I was a little bit involved with the bikers in Ottawa at that time, and I had hit a hitter out in my house. He had just killed somebody, and he hid in my place to get away from the cops. And I wore his jacket for a couple of weeks, and then we were in one of the clubhouses, and I was talking about getting a tattoo, and this guy just freaks on me. Like, he had tattoos all over, right?
Oh, really?
And he's just like, "Don't you ever do that. That's the most identifiable mark you can have."
Oh, I see.
And
So it wasn't just the fact that you were getting get tattoos, but it was the type of the
he
kind of
knew the
tattoo.
problems they caused him, right?
Right.
He was identified for crimes because he had certain tattoos.
Right.
Yeah, more identifying than anything, because people don't look at you when they're scared, but they'll look at your arm.
Right.
They're looking down, right? Scared.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So
it's more of like a logistical advice.
I think he was a bit grooming me to, like, they did ask me to go to Spain. So I was 150 pounds, right? And they wanted to put another 120 pounds on me of body mold drugs.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's when I had decided it was time to get out of Ottawa.
Okay.
Shortly after that night, I'm like, okay, you're just getting a little too close to something that's gonna cost too much.
What made you come to that realization? Because it sounds like you were like running with that crew, and you were thinking about putting tattoos and stuff.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
What made you
I
come
was
to that?
involved in the lifestyle. I was working as a bartender and downstairs at Barrymore's. Bikers hung out there, selling coke, doing more coke than I was selling.
How old were you at that point?
Yeah, that's kind of hazy.
Like 20?
16.
Oh.
I went in.
16.
So just at the beginning of that year, I think I went to AA for 16 years old. First time. I lasted for 2 weeks, I think, and went back out.
Was it your own decision to go to AA at that point?
Yeah, I knew I had a problem.
Okay.
Like, it wasn't hard to tell. Like, a lot of my drinking was blackout drinking. I was doing huge amounts of drugs.
When did the other drugs come into the picture?
So grade 8, I started smoking pot. So 15 years old so maybe 16 years old, my brother introduced me to intravenous drugs.
16.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. So, yeah, everything was out of control. I had no control in my life at all. When my dad kicked me out, I tried to go to school. I was living on welfare for a couple of months, going to Ottawa Tech. I think I made 6 months there, the end of my grade 11. And I got a part-time job in Ottawa University cafeteria and said, yeah, screw school.
Okay.
Because they were paying me $6 an hour versus, I think, $300 a month.
Right.
Yeah, it didn't make sense. And then without school at all, I was completely wild, like a daily drug user, daily drinker. Yeah.
Like from morning to night, or
no, you'd
like
sleep
patterns?
till 3, have a crappy job. But I learned in my job at Ottawa U, I was hired to sweep 2 floors, but I could from working on a farm, I could do my 2 floors in 20 minutes.
Okay.
And I'd go to the chefs, go, give me something to do, because I got 3 hours here, right? So,
right.
Like, I can't sit on this broom for 3 hours. So they made me an assistant chef. shortly after being an assistant chef, I'm doing hot knives with one of the cooks there.
Oh,
We're just like drinking and partying, and like cooking was, it was a cover job, like you could work and everywhere. I moved across this country cooking. I would have a connection for dope the minute I got a job.
wow.
Uh, and you could drink all through work. Like,
Just by virtue of cooking.
yeah, like the better the cook you were, the more control you had. So as a chef, I became a chef in a restaurant in Winnipeg, and I could put any alcohol into any sauce I wanted.
Okay.
So they'd bring me the bottle, right? Like I was taught in Toronto in a 5-star restaurant by the pasta chef. You order one box of wine for the pasta and one box for yourself.
Oh, wow.
Okay.
So the pasta is actually made with wine?
Oh yeah, yeah. All your best food has got liquor or wine in it. Like
Oh,
that's the best flavor enhancement you can put
really?
in. Oh yeah, it
Interesting.
kills me because I can't cook the same
Yeah.
anymore. So, I'm serious.
True, true.
Yeah, I
It-
can't do it anymore because I haven't touched a drop for it'll be 30 years this October.
wow, yeah.
So
That's powerful. 30 years.
yeah,
But so at 16 though, you realized that you were already having an issue
I
and you
knew.
needed
Yeah,
to do something about it.
I wanted to do something at that age already,
Wow.
but I wasn't prepared. Like because I couldn't communicate with people. Uh, I was a people pleaser because of my dad. All right, I wanted my dad's love. I didn't get my mom's love, so I tried to please my dad. I brought home straight A's. I worked hard on the farm. Like I was by his side all the time. I helped him do stuff. I was screaming out for love, but not getting it. And yeah, so he didn't teach me to communicate at all. My mom wasn't there for me, so my broken brothers and sisters could teach me. So yeah, I didn't know how to fit into AA at that point. Like they just walked in, gave me responsibility and a coffee. I hated coffee and people pleaser. Yeah, sure, I'll do the responsibility, but that drove me away. They gave
Right.
me too much responsibility right away.
I see.
I can't deal with responsibility. I can't deal with
Hmm,
myself.
I
How
see.
can I take on somebody else's stuff?
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
so
It's got to be progressive. You got to be ready for the right. It's like they say you need the right challenge where it's not too hard to push you off and it's not too little where it's like whatever.
yeah, they say you got to hit your bottom,
Hmm.
and I hit so many bottoms, but yeah, I really had to get rid of this. I thought I knew everything, right? I
Right.
was so self-absorbed
That pride.
because, well, pride, yeah, just lack of trust of anybody else. So the only person I could trust was me.
Right.
Yeah.
Which made
So,
sense just considering your upbringing and not being able to trust your family members, your father, mother.
oh, the
So
trust
you
was
all the
shattered at such a young age. Yeah.
so you were fully self-reliant. So when you left Ottawa, then where did that take you?
Uh, I think I went to Montreal for a while and then Toronto, and party was way worse in those two
Okay.
places. Yeah. So I came back to Ottawa for a short while, became homeless in Ottawa, and said, well, I got 2 unemployment checks at a time as a result of waiting for them. And I'm like, well, that's enough for a train ticket to Vancouver. Yeah. So took the train to Vancouver. Yeah, that was a scary ride. Don't remember hardly any of it. We were running off the train at every stop to buy 40s or 60s.
So you were with somebody at that point?
No, found some guys from Newfoundland.
Okay.
Is anybody that drinks has a bottle, you got friends. If you got a
Right.
bottle, you got friends.
Right. Right.
So I think after the ticket, I had $900 in my pocket.
Okay.
It's like, well, I should be able to get to Vancouver and get set up. No problem. I got off the train in Vancouver. I had $2 in my pocket.
Wow.
Yeah, that's like a 5-day train ride or something like that.
Wow.
All on booze. Yeah.
So when you got to Vancouver, then what was your plan?
Um, yeah, I didn't have a plan. It's called a geographical cure,
I
right?
see.
I'm leaving my problems in Ottawa
Right.
and I'm going to go to Vancouver and I won't have problems. The biggest
Right.
lie alcoholics tell
Right.
themselves.
Right.
Yeah, what a joke that was. So I get off the train, I got $2, right? So fortunately, Vancouver's always had a pretty good underbelly life, you know.
Mhm.
Found somebody told me where I could get a meal, a shower, and some used clothing for $2.
Okay.
Yeah. So,
Wow.
and then somebody at that place after the shower told me where I could bed down for the night. Bedding down, they gave you, I think, about $6 a day in meal tickets.
Okay.
Uh,
This was like at a shelter?
yeah, it's be like the Salvation Army, basically, except it
Right.
was just some sort of shelter. I don't remember the name of it. So you
Right.
get $6 a day, which you could buy a pack of cigarettes and maybe a drink or something, and get $2 meal.
Okay. So
Right?
that was a priority.
Yeah, well,
Cigarettes, alcohol, meal.
yeah,
Right.
yeah, yeah. But for one of the good things my dad passed on to me was to be a hard worker. All right. So out of the shelter, if you stood out front, the moving companies would come by and pick certain guys to go move for the day, and you'd make like $30, right?
Okay.
So I got picked any day I wanted to work, I'd get picked to go move. So I did that for a while, and then got back into the cooking,
Mhm.
right? Got back into the cooking, got back into the drugs,
So
the
before
soft
that,
drugs. Yeah.
you weren't doing. It was just
Oh,
alcohol.
well, as soon as I was out there, it's like first picture sent back to home, 6-pack on the beach,
Right.
like, hey, it's summer here,
Yeah. It's good
like,
time. Good
yeah,
time.
yeah. Looked like you were having fun. But yeah, it was just another struggle. Got cooking, got in shady places, like restaurant I was working in, the guy had just closed one of the busiest strip clubs in Vancouver and opened this restaurant, right?
Yeah.
So drugs were pretty thick there. The waitresses were like, whoa. Like, yeah, I got involved with one of the waitresses. She's doing coke like crazy. I'm going crazy because I'm like, oh, I just came off of 4 years injecting that stuff. I don't want to do coke, like,
Okay.
okay, you keep your coke. I'm just drinking. Like,
Okay. Okay.
drinking like a madman, though, to make up for the lack of coke, the lack of pot. Well, I still smoke pot. So I smoke pot even 2 years after joining AA.
But you had enough self awareness to control some of the other drug use, though.
So I knew I was killing myself. I had a couple premonitions at a young age. Uh, one that I'd never die from doing drugs or alcohol, but that I'd die later from a liver disease.
Mm.
And two, that I would die over in Europe.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah. And these were very clear to me. And then my favorite lie I would always tell myself, because I went to AA a lot of times and failed.
Mm-hmm.
And every time I was sitting at a bar again, looking at the whatever was in the glass, about to shoot it back, I'd look at it and go, "Oh well, Rick, if you live till 30, you'll quit and make something out of yourself." And I never expected to live till 30. So that's why it was the lie to me,
Mm.
because like I did crazy things to me, like a butterfly and a needle in both arms and shooting wicked amount of coke and speed, and
Oh.
did 52 hits of acid one time because I was freaking out and worried I was going to get busted. So I shoved a whole whack of bladder in my mouth.
Okay.
Didn't think I'd come back from that. The scariest time, I injected so much coke, I stopped breathing. And I was with friends that I always said, look, if I kill myself when we're together and if it's your place, clean the place up, throw me in the dumpster, and don't worry, like,
Wow.
yeah. So
You were on that level.
that place was cleaner than I had ever seen it when I came out of that.
Wow.
That scared me because I was in the dumpster next, right?
Yes.
Like, I'd never seen clean floors in their place.
Wow.
So, yeah, that was a scary one.
So this is
But
all while you were in Vancouver.
no, that one was here just
Okay.
before I went there.
Okay.
That was part of the reason I went there. My nickname at the time was Rick Death, the Martian from Hell. Yeah,
It's quite the
was,
nickname.
that's I worked with a band, and that's what they put me down as on the guest list.
Right.
Yeah. Just go and ask for the names, and you'll know yours when you hear it.
Right.
I was 110 pounds, 6'2".
Wow.
I was skin and bones,
Wow.
like scary person. Used to carry a 10-inch Bowie knife in the back of my pants, like
Right.
up the back.
Because you were ready just to get jumped or something for drugs or.
I went through a lot of violence. I never pulled a knife on anybody, but that one was more to scare the doctors, so they'd give me prescriptions because you could get Quaaludes at the time, right?
Right.
But I would.
So they would do a checkup on you. They'd see
the knife, and then
okay.
they'd want to send me to another doctor, but they'd give me the script right away, right? So no problem, you're getting a script.
Right.
Yeah, but I had a lot of violence towards my father. So what I learned when I started doing therapy was I would get in a lot of bar fights, and I would always look for somebody bigger picking on somebody smaller. Mm. And I would step in on that, and I would let that person have all my rage.
The big bully.
The big bully, yeah. And yeah. So
is that like you were seeing yourself in that?
I was beating up my dad.
Right.
That big bully was my dad every time.
Right.
Like I didn't realize it until I got some clarity in my head, like I always believed I was completely insane. I even believed it when I was telling the doctors I needed Quaaludes, like, yeah. And I stayed away from doctors because I didn't want to get put in an asylum.
Okay.
Right? Because it was still a thing they did back then.
Right.
And I didn't want to go there. I didn't want to get electrocuted and stuff, I wanted to die on a drug.
Right. Yeah.
So, yeah. So 30 years old.
So because of that vision that you had that, okay, or that thought that, okay, once I'm 30, then I'm going to do something. Did that happen when you hit 30?
Yeah. Threw a wickedly wild party for my 30th birthday. I put 30 beers in the bottom fridge, told everybody that came if they touched one, I'd kill them. And they believed me. And I think I did 10 hits of acid. I drank every one of those beers. And I'm sitting there rolling a joint the next morning at the girlfriend's place going, shit, you have to quit, man.
Mm.
And
You remember that thought?
yeah, oh yeah, I remember sitting there rolling that joint, not thinking that the joint was a problem because that was minor,
Yeah,
like
yeah,
doing hordes of LSD and drinking blackout. Every time I drank at that point, I blacked out every day. I was working as the chef. I could drink in their bar after work until 3 in the morning. So I'd black out, get home, have a beer on the way to work the next day, get drunk all over again. So, yeah, I was a slave to alcohol. Yeah.
So on that when you're there, the day after your 30th birthday, you're rolling that joint, and you're thinking this thought that I need to stop. Did you take any action to stop those other drugs, or
So
was it just a thought at
my
that point?
I didn't go to AA at that point. Uh, I got a dog.
Okay.
Yeah, it's like somebody gave me a puppy dog,
Okay.
and I'm like, okay, Rick. Well, every time you want to drink, you're gonna walk this dog,
Okay.
and that actually worked for me. Except that I was insane. I was so. Uh, my girlfriend at the time was my girlfriend because she could keep up drinking.
Right. So perfect partner in crime.
She quit the same time. Was unbelievable. Like within a month, I had a bed.
Wow.
Instead of sleeping on the floor in this apartment that was pretty crappy.
Right.
6 months, I had a stereo and a bed. I'm like, wow. 8 months, I had a business handed to me.
Wow.
A friend of my brother's died suddenly. It was a lawn care business. I was handed these contracts and I was off. So
So at this point, you were like 8 months. You were sober, or
I
eight?
was dry,
Wow.
dry and sober, big difference.
Oh, okay. What? Tell me what was the
So
difference.
alcohol is just a symptom of problems. All right. I had so much emotional garbage in my head from the abuse, from the my own abuse to myself, from the alcoholism, from the drug addiction. At that time, I was still completely suicidal. Uh, it felt like there was a squirrel running around in a cage in my brain. I could not focus. I'd be labeled some four character label for sure. All right.
Right. Right.
But I was just insane, completely insane, and still very self reliant,
Self-absorbed.
self.
Right.
So poor girlfriend quits drinking with me. Short period of time and life is getting good, right? And I'm starting to think, well, after a year, I'm going to be okay. I can go back to drinking, right?
Okay.
Yeah. 9 months, 9, 10 months, I think. We bought a house.
Wow.
Yeah.
So in nine
Yeah.
months, you clean up your act, you got your stereo, you got your room, and then you got your
Had
business, and
had
you
a
get a house.
completely furnished apartment.
Wow.
We bought a house, me, her, and her brother. At the time, we bought a house in Winnipeg, $54,000, right?
Okay.
It was peanuts.
Yeah.
But I get in the house, I'm like, wow, man, you can't drink now until this house is paid for.
Right.
Because I knew me, if I drank, I'd drink the house. Yeah, it'd be gone. Sell it and drink, drink, drink. So responsibility, and trying to act like a person of real society, right?
Right. Right.
Living with a girl. We got a house. We got a dog.
Yes.
Walk the dog. Uh,
Seem like a normal guy.
Almost, yeah. But so very hard to deal with, okay, because what I was taught didn't wasn't taught to communicate. I couldn't communicate with my girlfriend because we weren't drinking.
Mm.
So she got really mad one day because I was crazy. Came home and just whipped a book at the back of my head. I was sitting on the couch,
Wow.
whipped it at the back of my head, bounces off. I'm like, oh, what's this? I look at the book, Adult Children of Alcoholics. I'm like, well, been dry for 2 years at that point, I think.
Mhm.
Oh, I'd give it a read. Like, I read it halfway through. I'm like, how could somebody write a book about me and not talk to me?
Wow.
Like, all the emotional problems that were going on inside of Rick, all the, I was a liar, I was angry, I was suicidal. Everything in that book was in my behavior. And
Wow.
I put the book down. We lived only 6 blocks from the Addictions Foundation in Manitoba.
Mhm.
And I ran into that place and I looked at the person at the counter and I said, I need help. Like,
Just from reading that book.
from reading that book, it opened my eyes to the fact that the alcohol and the drugs, they were just symptoms of the problems.
Right.
I had to deal with all the emotional crap that was keeping me suicidal, that was making me. So, my idea of therapy at the time, if my girlfriend got me mad, I'd go up and renovate the third floor, which was punching the walls out. Okay.
Right. Right. Taking out your
Yeah,
frustration
yeah.
on
Well, we
something.
had to take all the drywall down, or it was lath and plaster actually. So it was
I
not
see.
very good therapy. So, yeah, unfortunately, she had an alcohol problem, but her dad was a professor at the university. Her mother was the first person I thought that truly loved me.
Oh wow.
Yeah, yeah.
So you were able to kind of get that motherly connection.
Well, yeah, I don't know if I could call it that, but was allowing somebody to reach me.
Right.
The girlfriend and I was just about sex, really. I was a sex addict too, right? So I was abused by a woman when I was 13. My dad got me a job painting for a couple that was splitting up.
Okay.
My first day on the job, I'm cutting, and she comes out all in lingerie, right?
Wow.
Yeah, well, 13 years old, that was the best job I ever had. But that screwed me up so much for relationships with women.
Right.
All right. Because, yeah, everything had to be like that again.
Right.
And that's never, just like the drug, you're always chasing the first high.
Right.
You can never achieve that again. Like
Right.
that joy, the supposed joy, it's there, it's gone. And you just hooked for the rest of your life chasing it. And same with sex. Whatever like, yeah, the things my brother did to me caused me to do some things too. Like I sold myself times. Uh, but this woman messed me up more than anything because any woman I had after her had to be dressed like that or, like want it like that. And she was a sick person too because I was 13, right? You don't
Right.
take a. So,
You look like a man. That you were 6 foot tall, right?
yeah, oh
So
yeah,
it
yeah,
was
yeah, yeah. Yeah, she didn't know I was that young, I don't think, but
it
she
was
was just crying out in pain from the breakup, used me, and I was okay with being used.
right.
But then, so I'm in a relationship with this woman. When I quit drinking, neither of us knew how to be in a relationship. Neither of us knew anything about love. It was strictly about sex. Like my proposal to her, I bought a truck And I looked at her, I go, well, we got all the bills now. If we make it through a year of paying for the truck, I'll marry you if you want.
That was your
That was my proposal. All right. I wasn't expecting a yes from that. Right? But she's so messed up, she jumped on it. Right? It's like, oh man, like
You're throwing a Hail Mary out there.
wow, it was like I'm trying to fit into society, not
Right,
knowing what I'm doing,
right. Like
and still,
stumbling your way through.
yeah, still totally messed up emotionally,
So you were dry
psychologically. I
for
was dry 7 years before I got into AA.
wow.
So I did my first bit of therapy after year 3 of dry drunk.
This is where you
That's
ran off to the
they
spot.
they sent me. They said, "Well, we can send you over to the man. Can't remember the name of the house. It was for adult children of alcoholics. Intense 6 months group therapy. They said you might not get in there for 3 months, but go put your application in." So I went, got an interview for the next Monday, and I sat in that interview and I said, "Rick, be honest for the first time in your life. All right. I'm 33, 34 years old." And I just tell her exactly what's going on inside of Rick, how I'm suicidal every day, how I go upstairs and punch the walls out because of my anger. Like, I think of killing people still,
Yeah.
So I was in therapy the next Monday.
Okay, you
Like,
didn't have to wait the 3 months.
no waiting at all. I was in therapy, and so I go to therapy, group therapy. I'm like, oh, you're crazy, man. Like, I'm sitting in the first chair right beside the door, ready to bolt.
Right.
Like, I'm so ready to run out of that place. So afraid of being honest. So afraid of interacting with people I don't like. I called myself an introvert my whole life because in reality, I did introvert into myself to protect myself, to stay away from people that could hurt me, because if they can't get close, they can't hurt you.
Right.
So I'm sitting there just holding on to the chair, going, they do something weird, I'm out of there, right? And a girl gets up. So the way they did it, there were a group of people that were 2 weeks from getting out, people in the middle, and brand newcomers. So there's a girl from the going out stage got up and told her story. And I'm sitting there going, starting to relax a bit, like, because her story was so close to mine. The abuse, all the garbage, the drug addiction, the alcoholism, that I'm like, wow, you're not alone, right? And so a thing they taught there too that really, really helped me was meditation. So they did every day, they would do a guided meditation. It took me about 2 weeks before I'd close my eyes for that. But
Why weren't you closing your eyes?
well, I didn't trust them, right? I still had no trust. Like, I'm not going to close my eyes. And
You're gonna do
there
something to
was
me.
12 patients in there. There was another 4 counselors. Like,
Right.
yeah, way too much. Like,
Right.
no.
Mhm.
So 2 weeks, I closed my eyes, and for the first time, that squirrel that's running in the rat cage in my brain was shut off. First time in my life, I got a taste of peace, and that teaching right there really. I closed my eyes every time and did that guided meditation. I bought the tapes. I did guided meditations every day for 2 years.
Wow.
Yeah, because I was only in that therapy for 6 months and then I was out again, right?
Mhm.
I didn't have AA at that point.
So you found doing these meditations, it allowed you to find that peace
A
and
sense of peace.
quiet.
I was still suicidal sometimes, but it wasn't a dogged thing. You know, it wasn't chasing me constantly. Uh, like life was still life, but that gave me I'd do it in the morning and go, had my own business, go work. I had a business. I didn't have to deal with anybody. I cut
Right,
grass for
right,
7 years by myself.
right, right.
Yeah, that was peaceful too.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I needed that too, I think. And
But being alone, you didn't find that you were stuck in your thoughts and whatnot.
the meditation shut off the bad stuff. I had a business to run and develop, so there was good stuff happening in my life. Had a house to work on, so I quit demolition with my
Right,
knuckles.
right,
You know,
right.
I learned what a hammer was really for.
Hmm. So it sounds like the responsibilities were slowly growing upon themselves in your life, and by virtue of having these responsibilities, it was allowing you to
It, it,
detach
it
from.
was, yeah, it was a big help in preventative measure, you know, because I knew how bad an alcoholic I was. I knew how bad a drug I was. And I knew in that time when I was clean, I had this sense, if you go back, you're going to die. I just knew that. And so 7 years, 6 in that house with my so-called wife. And
So after the year with the truck
the
payments,
role
do you
model,
guys do you guys you gotta
yeah,
get
we were
married?
playing, yeah, the roles we were playing.
Right.
Uh, so year 6, first it was her dad died. That was kind of a blessing because he was suffering from MS all the time I knew him. But 6 months later, the brother that abused me died. 6 months after that, her mom died. Uh, like this was like that, you know, the heart problem on the table, nicked artery, dead. Yeah. So that was very difficult for my wife. And I don't think I was supposed to hear this, but a couple weeks after, she was telling something. I had supported her to go through school, get her degree in programming. And she was telling somebody in the back lane, and I just overheard that she was taking a job in England.
Oh, wow.
And I kind of went to her after, and I'm like, what's this? We're moving to England?
Hmm.
And yeah, she just sort of, well, you blah, 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 you know? So,
She spilled the beans.
yeah, yeah. And yeah, so she goes, within 2 months, she's gone to England, and I'm left behind. We had a cottage, we had a home. I had to get the house rented out, I had to get the cottage closed down. And yeah, so she goes over. I
She left
find
without you.
she's there 2 months without me.
But the plan was that you were gonna join her eventually.
Yeah, after the talk, yeah, I could go.
Oh, okay,
Yeah.
but initially she was
I don't think I was
gonna.
supposed to. Yeah,
I see. I
yeah.
see.
So
Interesting. And do you think that was her trying to get away from her
she
problems?
was running from, because she was hurt. Her mom got transferred in the last days before the operation, and she didn't get in to see her at the operation hospital before she died. And so we saw her dying on the table, right?
I see.
So she felt a lot of guilt about that. And then she goes to England on her own, and I'm not thinking like about that. I'm like getting the house rented out, I'm getting the cottage closed down, I'm just working, closing my business down, getting good
Right.
guy to take that over so my customers are happy. And then so I get over there, and I'm going through customs, and this is one of my premonitions that I would die in Europe, and the guy's not going to let me into Europe. He's like, hey, he goes, you got to, how long you staying? I'm like, oh, 3 to 5 years. Oh, do you have a visa? Well, no, my wife's a British citizen. She says I don't need one. Well, sir, you definitely need a visa
Yeah.
to stay that long in this
Yeah.
country. And old Rick would have just blown up and ended up in a jail cell.
Right.
But I was able to talk to that guy for half an hour. At the end of the half hour, he goes, okay, you have a return ticket for 2 weeks because it was cheapest to buy it like that.
Right.
Go back on that ticket, get your visa, come back.
Okay.
And that is where Rick, old, crazy, drugged out Rick, died in Europe.
Oh.
So that premonition did come true.
Mm.
And
From that moment, because of that, or some stuff happened afterwards?
well, I still had moments of anger and whatnot. Like, you don't get rid of all that anger like that. But to me, I saw that as my premonition from that I carried with me all my life, that I was going to die in Europe. And here it wasn't a physical death. It was a death of the bad Rick, you know, and very strong evidence for me, because the picture was me getting tossed in a box and shoved on a crappy plane and don't ever come back, you know. Like,
so were you almost seeing yourself like from an external lens and seeing like, whoa, what's going on? I'm actually talking to this guy in a relaxed way.
it was
like after the fact, reflecting on it. Like,
yeah, I could see there was a different Rick there. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
And do you think all of that happened as a result of the therapy you were going through?
The first round of therapy. I didn't make AA yet.
Okay.
So the first round of therapy there brought that peace, that meditative peace into me.
Right.
All right. So I learned that I could meditate anytime. So I didn't have to pay attention to what was going on there. I could just zone out for a second and bring that peace back into my head. Right. Little pieces sometimes, but little pieces go a long way. Yeah. So I get in to Europe, England, and a month later we go to a Christmas party, and here's my wife drinking like we used to drink. Oh, wow. She had hidden the fact that she started drinking again. And I went up to her, and the whole party was just people pounding. And I'm like, I can't take this. This is too insane. I cannot be in here.
You didn't have a single drink? No,
I didn't touch anything. So I went to her and, look, I can't stay in a party with all these alcoholics. And she looks at me, I'm not effing alcoholic, right. You know, like, she's so she made it about her. Oh, she was hammered. Like, right. Yeah. So give me the keys to the car. I'll go home. I'll come and get you when you're ready. Right. So I go home, just like in our early days. She doesn't come home for 3 days.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So Christmas Day, she looks at me and she goes, yeah, I want a divorce. Christmas Day. Yeah. Oh. Yeah, and in that house in Winnipeg was the first time I had learned to start to enjoy Christmas again. You know, because there was no alcohol. It wasn't a drunk fest. It was a pleasant thing with her mother, and, you know, and then she just crushed it. And I think what she was trying to do, and she came very close, she was trying to get me to go drink. Because I took that news, and old Rick came right out, and my hand stopped about 6 inches from the doorknob. I had 2 credit cards, both had about $15,000 availability on them. I was going to go on a tear, you know, but my hand couldn't touch the knob. So that's where God really started working on me, because when I had come back to get the visa, I had to come to Ottawa. I didn't go to Winnipeg where we lived. I came to Ottawa and I stayed with a sister that was in AA. And then when I got back to England, her phone number was the only phone number I had with me when my wife told me we were done,
Right.
you know? And yeah, so when I couldn't open the door, I sat down on the couch and I rolled a joint.
Okay.
You know, had to medicate somehow because
Right.
the insanity was coming full bore.
Right.
So I wasn't smoking pot like I used to. Smoke one joint every 2 days or something.
Okay.
Like,
In England.
yeah.
Right.
Oh yeah, it's everywhere. So
Okay.
yeah, so smoked my joint and went, okay, well, this was 1999, right?
Mm-hmm.
I get a flight. They couldn't book me until just after New Year's Day
Okay.
because everybody's going crazy, like Y2K, whatever
Right.
crap, right? Like the
Right.
world's gonna end, you know. Well, mine did, but like everybody else's was okay. So yeah, it's like crazy thing is like we go to London for New Year's Eve. London, England, me and the wife, we get a room, we're having sex, everything, you know, like completely insane people. Like,
and that was after she already told you to
told me we were
divorce.
done.
Okay, wow.
Yeah, and had been unfaithful, but it
Right.
wasn't. It was all just about sex with that girl.
Right.
Like,
That residual tension was still there.
we
Or
just
that
had
lust, I
sex.
should
Yeah,
say.
lust.
Residual
Yeah,
lust.
yeah. She had it as much as I did. Like, and in our early getting together, we would go sleep with other people. Oh, it doesn't matter. Who cares, you know?
Right.
And then we just ended up living together. And then, yeah, she said yes to that proposal. So,
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah. So I get on the plane finally after that. And I'm coming back to Winnipeg now. And I'm like, oh, I'll find a new girl as soon as I get on the ground, you know?
Confident.
Yeah. Well, no, that's what. So you take the alcohol and the drugs away, then the sex addiction is more pronounced, right?
Right.
So you got to have something that makes you feel good.
Right.
And yeah, I didn't have drugs. Well, I still had a bit of pot, but it wasn't the same, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Felt insane sometimes when I smoked at that point.
Oh,
Like,
really? Like it would
the
bring some
skunk
psychotic
weed,
episodes.
skunk weed at that time of life was wicked stuff.
Okay.
I was driving home one night and I couldn't sense my legs from here down, right?
Oh, wow.
It's like, and I'm driving a truck. Yeah, so
That's
yeah. Yeah, so I wasn't getting the same joy from smoking. It was more still just a sedative, but so, and the guy I had rented my home to was still going through his divorce. So I go into depression when I get into my house. I'm talking deep depression. Like I lock myself in my room. I've got milk in the window. It's winter. And I got a few boxes of cereal. So that's food. Bathrooms, I can just squeeze out, hit the bathroom, get back in my room quick. The guy's down on the first floor. I think I even screwed the door shut. Yeah. So
you'd be totally alone.
Yeah. Well, I suffered great bouts of depression most of my life until just recently, actually. Like, so, I finally forcing his way through that door to try and help me, right?
Okay.
And he's totally negative. He's like, Rick, you got to take all the money and put it in a different bank. And you got to take this house and get the deed secured somewhere else. And I'm like, are you crazy? I still love this woman, what I thought was love.
Right.
I'm not going to do anything to hurt her.
Okay.
Yeah. So he drove me out of the house. Actually, it didn't get me out of the depression, but got me out. I started jogging. Nice. In winter in Winnipeg, it's an indoor track at the Y.
Okay.
So here I start jogging, and I'm running 7 miles 3 times a week.
Nice.
Yeah.
That's solid.
And this guy
right away.
Yeah, right away. Well, I had been cutting grass for 7 years. I wasn't good. I needed something physical, right?
Right.
So I start the running, and then I get a job helping the food bank, a Christian organization. So the last mile of my run, a guy had joined me every day. And he's always like, you want to go for a coffee after you run? But I'm still like isolated Rick, like, no thanks. Just going to go back home, go back into my room and depress, you know? But then I get this job at the food bank, and I listed 30 things on the sheet. They ask you for your qualifications, right? Mm-hmm. 30 things on there. They put me driving a truck, which I didn't even tell them I had a license.
Sure. Like, of all the things.
Well, I'm driving the truck going, wow, I always wanted to drive a truck. So God was doing things for me before I could even say his name, because I had this huge resentment towards that name. Mm. My mom being Catholic, my dad being alcoholic. My mom's answer to the beating was, well, it's God's will, you know.
Wow.
Yeah, so if that's God, I want nothing to do with a God. Became even a Satanist at one point, hanging out with witches. In Winnipeg, I had a girlfriend that was a pretty involved witch.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah, so walking down dark alleys, tarot, all that crap.
Oh. But then this is where you were still dry from the alcohol, but you were going down those routes.
Yeah, well, those ones were when I was still drinking.
Oh, okay.
The tarot guy was in AA, actually.
Okay, wow.
Yeah, yeah. So, I lost my track. Sorry. Where were we?
You were just saying how the guy had driven you out of the house.
Yeah, and in the volunteer position, they put me driving a truck. Right. And I could feel sorry for myself, like what I was going through. My wife had dumped me. I didn't have my business anymore. She was giving me some funds, so until I could get something going again. She paid me for a year, I think, which allowed me to do this volunteer stuff for a year. Because I had supported her going through school, so she supported me at least. Okay. And I'm driving this truck, and any day that I'd start feeling sorry about what was going on with Rick, God, this was Christian organization, would put somebody in the seat beside me, and they would cry about their story, and it would make me look at myself and go, Rick, yours ain't that bad.
Okay.
You know?
Nice.
Like,
so you were driving for a Christian organization?
Yeah.
I see.
Yeah.
I see.
Yeah. And getting good role models out of there. Really enjoyed helping people. I've always been a servant. Mm-hmm. All my life I've been a servant. So that was a great place for me to heal a bit.
It's crazy how other people's suffering can almost give us comfort in a strange sense.
Well, it just makes yours seem so small sometimes, right? It gives you that other person. So I felt more sorry for them than I felt for myself. And that gave me the beginning of empathy.
Right.
Empathy wasn't a word I knew before then. So I'm driving this truck, and every once in a while the word God came out of my mouth.
Wow. So this was like your introduction to Christianity almost, in a sense? Or?
Not really, no. A little bit. I'm sure they were praying for me because I was still pretty crazy.
Right.
And that guy that was running with me in the last mile, after some of the volunteering, I said, okay, if he comes today, you'll say yes to going for the coffee.
So he would still keep on asking you, even though you
Yeah.
say
Oh,
no
yeah,
every
yeah, yeah.
time.
He was persistent. Like,
Yeah.
so he's there, asked me if I want to go for coffee. I go, okay, you got me. Let's go. Where does he take me? An AA meeting.
Oh wow,
Like,
that's where
I
they got
don't
the
know.
best coffee.
I don't know if we talked about what was going on. I really don't know how
Right.
he figured out I needed AA.
But because you weren't drinking at that point.
I wasn't drinking. I was running to,
Right.
it was my new drug was the running.
Right. Right. Okay.
Adrenaline. Like I got the runner's high and everything,
Yeah,
right?
it's a beautiful thing. It's
Yeah.
a beautiful thing.
Yeah. Not when you're chasing
True.
it. Yeah. So, and then in this AA meeting, this guy that was about 6 inches taller than me, I'm 6'2", so
Yeah.
he was about 6'8". Another 100 pounds on me. I'm a whole 150 pounds at that point.
Okay. Nice.
He comes up, looks down at me, and goes, "I'm going to sponsor you." I'm like, okay. Like I'm done fighting. Yeah. So he takes me to an in-depth big book study group. All that group did was study the steps in the big book.
What's the big book, sir?
The big book is Alcoholics Anonymous book.
I
We
see.
call it the big book.
Right.
It's like our Bible in AA.
Right.
It's got God in it. It was basically Bill started the book and was influenced by Christians. And some of that influence made it into the book.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of the people went through, especially in the early days, went through the AA and went back to church. All right. It's changed a lot now. Church is not mentioned as much, but it's all still in that book. All right. And so I was reading stuff that had the word God in it all the time. And then God was coming out of my mouth more just from going to those meetings.
Wow.
And then I've got godly people sitting with me in the truck, and I got broken people, and I'm working for a Christian company. So then the wife presses for the divorce. Your financing's getting cut off. All right. So
Okay.
I'm like, okay, I got to get a job. Can't do all this good stuff anymore. And I'm putting my resume out I had forklift license. I had experience in warehouses.
Oh.
I had a great resume. I had 7 years self-employment.
Right.
You know, nobody was even responding to my resumes. And so I'm getting frustrated, right? So I go home one day, I'm frustrated. At the end of the day, okay, I finally pray to God. I'm like, God, I don't know what's going on, but if you're really there, then I need you to show me what I got to do here. And yeah, went to sleep. The next morning, I was awakened by my phone, and my mother was on the phone, and she was in tears almost. She's, Rick, I think I got to sell the farm. We had a 10-acre hobby farm in Russell here, just outside of Ottawa. And my dad had several strokes. He was in a nursing home. She couldn't afford to keep him in the nursing home. And I'm like, Mom, just hold on. I'll get this house ready to sell, and I'll come back and help you. And as soon as I said that, her voice went to her normal voice. And I knew right there that was my answer to my prayer that I had prayed the night before. And I worked my butt off, got the house ready. Unfortunately, my dad died like a week before I got back. But that's what brought me back to this part of the country. And so now I had an idea of God. All right. So AA sort of teaches you to pick your own God.
Mm-hmm.
They do strongly lead you to a Christ if you read the big book closely, and right, it's in there.
Right. Because I heard that it was influenced by Christian theology.
Yeah, the steps originally come out of the Bible. So what AA
it was not the
taught
first step, right? Like to kind of believe in a higher power. Right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. But they let you choose your higher power because it's been softened so much.
Right.
All right. The old guys would have kicked your butt.
Yeah.
And made sure it was God.
Right.
All right.
Right.
Yeah. So I was able to come back here. My mom got diagnosed with diabetes just before I got back. My house in the divorce, so it was Winnipeg. We bought our house cheap, but I had put styrofoam on the walls on the first 2 floors, and I was renovating the 3rd floor. We had a 3-story house. So, and I just painted the styrofoam 1 inch, but that brought the value of the home down so much.
Oh, really?
It was way less than the cottage.
Wow.
So she got the cottage, I got the house. Wow. And I was able to rip all that styrofoam off, patch the holes in the wall, refinish the floors in 2 months, just going crazy.
Right.
I got a good price for my house.
Okay.
Was able to move here. It was funny. So I started the move. I drove my old truck with a trailer. The day I'm going to leave, my wife's lawyer takes all my money out of my bank.
Wow.
But I'm trusting God now, right?
Right.
Because he gave me the answer to prayer.
Right.
And I'm like, well, God, thankfully, you gave me all this cash from selling everything in the house, right? So I had a pocket full of cash.
Right.
And I'm driving back from Winnipeg, overloaded trailer, beat up 1967 International Scout. And I get about 300 miles from my mom's place, and I fill the tank with gas, and I'm like, God, I got $50 left. So you better do something for me because I do not want to be a burden on my mother. So either give me a job the day I get on there or provide. And I drive into my mom's place, and they're all coming up. Her and my sister come out of the house, and she comes out waving this letter. How did a letter get here for me? You know, I still to this day don't remember where it came from or anything, but it was $2,000, a check for $2,000. Yeah,
for you,
for me, in my name, from
at
I don't know
house.
what. Yeah,
in an envelope. You hadn't lived there for like decades at that point.
Yeah, like 30 years or something like that.
Wow.
Yeah, it blew my mind. So there's answered prayer again, right? Like,
so were you praying regularly at that point, or just like in your times of need?
So God and I had a pretty good relationship, but it wasn't the Bible God, although it had tinges of the Bible God.
Right.
Okay? Because of my drugs, and I think I previewed the Bible once or twice in my life. Right. And I did a lot of mushrooms, and I always went, well, these stories are somebody got wasted on mushrooms and wrote a good story, right? Right. So I had a real hard time believing that stuff. Right. So I get here, I'm able to help my mom into an exercise routine. We're walking every day. I'm applying for a job after a month, I think. Again, having a hard time connecting with this guy for a job. So I go to a Monday night AA meeting. He calls me the next day, and my mom tells him, well, he's still sleeping. He was out late to a meeting last night. This guy goes, oh, well, when he gets up, send him over here, right? And I go to the address. He's doing a roof. He's up on the roof, and he looks down at me, and he goes, oh, you a friend of Bill's? And that's code for, are you in AA?
Oh,
And I'm like looking at him going, well, I knew a Bill when I was here. I didn't even know the code at that time because I was only in AA a short time.
I see.
And so.
And sorry, who was this gentleman that had called you?
My first boss.
Oh, okay.
In Ottawa area here.
Okay,
so
I see.
Carpenter. Carpentry was the job I always wanted as a child. But because I got kicked out of home, ended up being a cook. Alcohol facilitated cooking.
Right.
Cooking facilitated alcohol. Right. Never got to fulfill my dream of being a carpenter.
Interesting.
Yeah. Wild the way the Lord was working for me in those days. Yeah.
Especially as a carpenter too, because of the biblical connection.
Amen. Like I felt so honored to finally get to be a carpenter. We're building, me and this guy, we were building an addition on a church when 9/11 happened. And he's after me every day to go to Alpha. I don't know if you ever heard of Alpha. No. Excellent teachings. If you want to become a Christian, find an Alpha course. It teaches you about the Bible. It teaches you about what Christianity really is. Excellent teachings. And there's the love of Christ shown there too. All right. So he's trying to get me to go to that course. I'm like, Bill, you got your idea, God. I'm happy with mine. Let's leave it at that. We'll do this work together and we'll be happy. Right. All right.
So you didn't want to hear anything about Jesus at that point?
I still had prejudice.
I see.
I didn't know it, but right. I was still resentful towards that God.
Right.
So I go home one day from building this addition, and my mom starts talking to me, and she just goes. And I stop her at the end, and I look at her, and I go, Mom, where'd you learn all that? She's like, all what? I'm like, all that you just said to me. Well, that's stuff I took from the Bible. And boom, the light comes on, right? Okay, so AA taught me to get rid of your prejudice and be honest, all right? And prejudice, a good old 40-year guy taught me the real meaning of prejudice. Prejudge, all right? From the Latin, it's based in that. So when he taught me that, I went, at first I'm like, I'm not prejudiced. I like anybody, any race, I don't care. If they're goof, they're goof. But I'm not prejudiced.
Right.
And those are jail words. Like if you called somebody a goof in jail, it was fight.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So, and that, I lived by that. I did a couple little short stints in jail. Both for drugs. Yeah. So.
But she was quoting the Bible and it resonated with you.
It sounded like it came right out of the big book. Oh. Exactly what she said. And then I connected the big book to the Bible. And I also connected, I've been prejudging Christianity.
Right.
All right. Just like everybody in the world today, right. They prejudge it because I developed my own perception of what Christianity was based on my terrible past with dealing with them. Okay, the guy that made me listen to a crappy sermon for a watery soup.
Right.
It gave me a terrible look on Christianity. Not to mention my mother's role in the abuse and whatnot. Not that she abused me, but she was a Christian. She didn't take us out of that home.
And so, just for that whole soup thing, we were talking about that before. Can you just tell everybody what that was like? You had.
So I was living on the streets in Vancouver and destitute sometimes, so starving sometimes, because you'd get $6 a day and these cards that you could redeem for next to nothing. And at the end of the day, if you were really, really hungry, you could go to this lineup and you'd get a bowl of soup, but they'd put you into the church and make you listen to a sermon before they'd give you the soup. And it was really watery soup. And like, you're starving and this guy is preaching at you. And I was just so resentful of that we had to listen to this guy while our guts are just trying to eat their way out of us, you know? It's like,
so again, the connection with Christianity was this negative thing.
I developed my own perception of what Christianity was, and none of it was good. Mm-hmm. It was all hypocrisy. It was all only what I thought of it. I never even thought that, hey, I've got to go and figure this out before I judge it. Right? But when my mom talked to me like that.
So what were some of those, the other images that you had of Christianity, just so to get deeper on that?
I just hated hypocrisy. I hated it all, you know, like I did terrible things to churches and whatnot. Like I was walking with Satan during my life, but so Christian church I despised completely. Like I thought everybody was fake. There was no real kindness coming out of it or anything like that.
And by the way, Rick goes to church every week now.
So. I love church now. Yeah, it's like the best day of my week.
Amen.
Yeah.
So tell me a little bit more about, like, even walking with Satan. Like, what was that like? Because some people might be like, oh, come on, Satan, really? Like, that's not real.
Well, I did tell you about that experience I had. I was overdosing on MDA. I'd been shooting it in my veins for a week. Hadn't slept. And so I finally tried to go to sleep. And as I closed my eyes to sleep, moments after I was asleep on the 9th floor, I saw a wolf coming through my window, exactly the bedroom, to kill me, basically. It was going to rip